Stop. Get your hands on that hood right now. Don't you move.
Officer, I'm just picking up my blood pressure medication.
I don't care about your pills. You match a suspect description.
I am a federal agent with the DEA. Check my credentials.
Yeah, and I'm the president. Keep your mouth shut and turn.
You are making a massive mistake.
The high-definition body cam recording you just witnessed captured everything, every aggressive step, every dismissive sneer, and every word of a confrontation that would eventually dismantle a police department's leadership. It is a chilling 15-second window into a power dynamic that shifted the moment the handcuffs clicked. Sergeant Miller believed he was dealing with just another suspect in a pharmacy parking lot, a man he could intimidate into submission without a second thought. He had absolutely no idea that the man standing before him, Marcus Sterling, was perhaps the most dangerous person he could have possibly targeted, not because of a weapon, but because of his badge. Sterling didn't panic. He didn't run. He stood his ground with the cold, calculated composure of a man who has spent 20 years dismantling international drug cartels. As a senior special agent with the DEA, Sterling has received the Distinguished Service Cross, led multi-jurisdictional task forces, and successfully prosecuted over 500 federal cases. When he told Miller to check his credentials, he wasn't asking for a favor, he was offering a warning. Miller's refusal to listen is now the focal point of a massive federal investigation. This lapse in judgment didn't just end a career, it's currently costing the city's police chief exactly $5.7 million in a landmark civil rights settlement. Before we dive deeper into the shocking details of how this arrest completely unraveled, I need you to do something right now. Drop a comment below and tell me, if you were in Marcus Sterling's shoes, would you have stayed that call? Just type yes or no. I also need you to hit that subscribe button right now because you don't want to miss the intense internal affairs audio we've uncovered. This story escalates in ways you won't believe. Marcus Sterling was never the type of man who walked into a room expecting special treatment. At 45 years old, he had built a life defined by discipline and a quiet, almost understated authority. He grew up in a household where respect for the law wasn't just taught, it was a way of life. By the time he joined the Drug Enforcement Administration in his early 20s, he already possessed a level of stoicism that made him a natural fit for undercover operations. Over the next 2 decades, Sterling became a titan in the agency. His resume is nothing short of legendary in federal law enforcement circles. He spent 5 years embedded in a high-level narcotics ring in South America, an assignment that earned him a personal commendation from the U.S. Attorney General. He's managed a budget of over $15 million for regional interdiction efforts and has been the lead investigator on 6 separate RICO cases that took down some of the most violent gangs on the East Coast. Beyond the numbers, Sterling is known among his peers as the Professor. He is a man who knows the Fourth Amendment better than most constitutional lawyers, and he's mentored hundreds of younger agents on the importance of procedural justice. Despite his high-status profession and the constant danger associated with his work, Sterling remained a pillar of his local community. He spent his weekends coaching youth basketball and volunteering at a local clinic. He was a man of habit, a man who believed that if you did the right thing, the system would work for you. His reputation was spotless. He had never had a single disciplinary infraction in 20 years of federal service. He was the literal embodiment of the good guy with a badge. That Saturday afternoon began like any other. It was a warm, late afternoon with the sun hanging low over the suburban landscape, casting long, peaceful shadows across the pavement. Sterling had just finished a workout and realized he was low on his blood pressure medication, a side effect of 2 decades of high-stress federal service. He pulled his silver sedan into the pharmacy parking lot, his mind likely on his plans for dinner or the case files waiting on his desk for Monday morning. He was just a man picking up a prescription, totally unaware that in less than 5 minutes, his life and the future of the local police department would be irrevocably changed by an officer who saw a suspect instead of a citizen. The pharmacy was a standard glass-fronted building in a quiet, affluent part of town. The air was still, smelling slightly of asphalt and car exhaust. Marcus Sterling exited the store carrying a small white paper bag, the kind millions of people carry every day. He walked toward his silver sedan, clicking his key fob to unlock the door. The sun hit the windshield, creating the sharp glare. He tossed the bag onto the passenger seat and was about to slide behind the wheel when the silence was shattered by the screech of tires. A dark blue patrol cruiser jerked into the space behind him, blocking him in. The man who stepped out was Sergeant Miller, a 20-year veteran of the force who had spent most of his career in high-crime sectors before transferring to this quieter precinct. Miller was 42, with a physique built by years of heavy lifting and a temperament hardened by what he called street intuition. To Miller, everyone was a potential threat until proven otherwise. He had received a vague dispatch call about a suspicious person loitering near the pharmacy, a call based on a single anonymous tip that provided no description other than a tall man in a gray. Sure, Miller didn't see the pharmacy bag. He didn't see the calm demeanor of a federal agent. He saw a man who didn't immediately look intimidated by his presence. And in Miller's mind, a lack of fear was a sign of guilt. He stepped out of his vehicle, his hand already resting on his holster, his boots crunching on the gravel. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't explain why he was there. He relied on a flawed reasoning process that dictated he must establish total dominance immediately to prevent an escalation. Ironically, his very presence was the catalyst for the disaster that followed. Sterling stood by his open car door, his hands visible and empty. He watched Miller approach with a look of professional curiosity rather than fear. He knew the protocols. He knew what a legal stop looked like, and he knew this wasn't it. As Miller closed the distance, his chest puffed out, his mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes, the first words out of his mouth set the stage for a $5 million catastrophe. "Officer Vermillion, get your hands on that hood right now. Don't you move." Victim: "Officer, I'm just picking up my blood pressure medication here. Is there a problem?" "No radiation." Sterling remained perfectly still, his voice low and even. He was performing a mental checklist of the officer's actions. No sirens had been used, no clear articulable suspicion had been stated, and the officer's hand was in a position that signaled a high readiness for lethal force. "Officer Milliner, I don't care about your pills. You match a suspect description. Hands on the car, or I'm putting you on the ground." Victim: "I am a federal agent with the DEA. My credentials are in my pocket. I'm going to reach for them slowly." "Officer Milliner, yeah, and I'm the president. Don't you reach for a damn thing. Keep your mouth shut and turn around." Now Rodian. This was the point of no return. In Miller's mind, Sterling was playing a part, using a common tactic he'd seen street lawyers use to delay an arrest. But Sterling wasn't playing. He was citing his status to provide Miller a bridge to de-escalate. Miller, blinded by his own adrenaline and bias, burned that bridge. "Victim, Sergeant, you are operating outside the scope of Terry v. Ohio. You have no reasonable suspicion that I am armed or dangerous, and you've ignored my identification as a federal officer." "Officer Miller, you want to talk law to me? I am the law out here." "You're resisting a lawful order." "Near rot." Sterling watched as Miller's face flushed a deep red. He noticed two bystanders near the pharmacy entrance pulling out their phones. He knew the optics were horrific, but he also knew that any physical resistance would give Miller the excuse he was clearly looking for. Sterling decided to let the system he served do the fighting for him. "Victim, you are making a massive mistake that you cannot afford, Sergeant. Look at the passenger seat. That is a pharmacy bag with my name on it." "Officer Milner, is that a threat? You're going in the back of the car. You're under arrest for obstruction." Neratz. Miller lunged forward, grabbing Sterling's wrist and twisting it behind his back. Sterling didn't pull away. He simply let his body go limp, a tactic used to prevent resisting charges. As the metal ratchets of the handcuffs bit into Sterling's skin, he turned his head to look directly into Miller's body cam. "Victim, this body cam is recording everything. My lawyers and the Department of Justice will see you tomorrow." "Officer Miller, keep talking." "Agent, see where it gets you." Have you ever been stopped by an officer who refused to listen to reason? Type yes or no in the comments right now. I'm curious to see how common this is. Iteration. Miller began a pat-down search, reaching into Sterling's pocket. His fingers brushed against the heavy, leather-bound wallet. He flipped it open, expecting to find a tattered ID or perhaps nothing at all. Instead, the gold and silver badge of the Drug Enforcement Administration caught the afternoon sun. Beside it was a federal ID card featuring Sterling's face and the signature of the DEA director. Miller stared at it for 3 full seconds. His grip on Sterling's arm didn't loosen, but his breathing changed. He was doubling down. To admit he was wrong now would be a total humiliation. "Victim, now that you've seen the badge, Sergeant, are you going to continue with this obstruction charge?" "Officer Milliner, this could be fake. I've seen better fakes than this. We're going to the station to verify." Narrachin, the stakes had just tripled. By acknowledging the credentials and choosing to ignore them, Miller moved from a mistaken identity defense into the territory of a willful civil rights violation under Section 1983. Victim: under Arizona v. Johnson, you can't prolong this seizure without independent reasonable suspicion. You verified my identity. My detention is now illegal. Officer Miller, I told you to shut up. Get in the car. Narration: Miller shoved the high-ranking federal agent into the cramped, plastic-molded back seat of the cruiser. The bystanders were now shouting at Miller, filming the entire process. Miller ignored them, slammed the door, and got into the driver's seat. The silence in the car was heavy. Miller's hands were shaking slightly as he gripped the steering wheel, but he put the car in gear and pulled away, leaving Sterling's silver sedan with its door still hanging open in the pharmacy lot. The interior of the patrol car smelled of stale coffee and industrial-grade disinfectant. Marcus Sterling sat in the back, his broad shoulders cramped against the hard plastic seat. He didn't say a word during the 8-minute drive to the precinct. He simply watched the back of Sergeant Miller's head, noting the way the officer kept checking his rearview mirror, his confidence visibly leaking out with every passing mile. Sterling was documenting the route, the time, and the physical sensations, the cold bite of the steel cuffs, the throb in his shoulder from the forced positioning. When they arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights of the booking area were blinding. Miller let Sterling inside, still treating him like a common felon. He marched him up to the booking desk, where a younger officer, Deputy Vance, was processing paperwork. Miller threw the DEA wallet onto the counter with a forced bravado. Officer Millen, got an obstruction. Guys claiming to be feds. Check this badge out. Narration: Deputy Vance picked up the leather case. He didn't even have to open it fully before his face went pale. Vance had attended a federal interdiction seminar 3 months prior where Marcus Sterling had been the keynote speaker. He looked at the badge, then looked up at the man in the charcoal polo shirt. Deputy Vance, Sergeant, this is Marcus Sterling. He's the senior special agent in charge of the regional task force. I was in his class in November. Narration: the air seemed to vanish from the room. Miller's jaw tightened, his eyes darting toward the surveillance cameras. He tried to save face, but the damage was done. Within seconds, the booking area was swarmed. A lieutenant emerged from an office, saw Sterling in handcuffs, and let out a sound that was half-gasp, half-groan. "Lieutenant, unlock him. Right now!" "Vance, get those keys." Narration: the lieutenant immediately grabbed the phone, calling the watch commander, who in turn called the police chief at home. The realization of the liability hit the department like a tidal wave. They hadn't just arrested a civilian, they had kidnapped a high-ranking federal official who was an expert in the very laws they had just broken. Lieutenant, Agent Sterling, sir, I am so incredibly sorry. This is a massive misunderstanding. Sergeant Miller was victim. Sergeant Miller was told 5 times who I was. He was shown my credentials in the field. He chose to proceed. Do not apologize for him. I want my property back, and I want a copy of the booking log. Narration: Sterling remained perfectly composed as his cuffs were removed. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He simply stood there, rubbing his wrists, watching the frantic chaos of the officers trying to figure out how to bury the incident. But Sterling wasn't going to let it be buried. He watched as the police chief himself rushed into the building 10 minutes later, still in civilian clothes, his face a mask of horror. Do you think Officer Miller should have been fired on the spot right then and there? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Marcus Sterling walked out of that police station at 6:45 p.m. By 7:15 p.m., he was on the phone with the chief judge of the federal district court and his personal civil rights attorney. He didn't go home to rest. He went to his office at the DEA field headquarters and began drafting a formal memo to the Department of Justice. The next morning, the police chief called Sterling's cell phone 16 times. When Sterling finally answered, the chief offered a profuse groveling apology, promising retraining for Miller. Sterling's response was ice cold. Retraining is for mistakes. What Miller did was a choice. We'll see you in court. 48 hours later, a federal civil rights lawsuit was filed. The complaint was 84 pages long and named not just Miller, but the chief and the city. It alleged a custom and practice of unconstitutional stops, Fourth Amendment violations, false arrest, kidnapping under color of law, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. By Monday afternoon, the bystander video from the pharmacy had hit the internet. It went from a local news snippet to a national firestorm in under 4 hours. On YouTube, the footage racked up 3 million views in a single day. On TikTok, it surpassed 10 million. The narrative was impossible to ignore. A high-ranking black federal agent was arrested for the crime of buying blood pressure medication. The internal affairs investigation was launched immediately, but the DOJ didn't wait for them. They launched their own pattern and practice investigation into the department. For 6 months, federal investigators poured over 5 years of stop and frisk data. What they found was damning. Statistics revealed that in this quiet precinct, black men were stopped at a rate 7 times higher than their white counterparts for suspicious activity, yet those stops resulted in weapon or drug seizures less than 1% of the time. The IA report was equally brutal. It discovered that Miller had 3 prior complaints of excessive force that had been swept under the rug by the current chief. The investigation concluded that Miller's decision to ignore Sterling's credentials was a willful and malicious disregard for established law, intended to punish Sterling for contempt of cop. The fallout was swift and total. Sergeant Miller was officially terminated 3 weeks after the investigation concluded. His termination letter cited 12 distinct violations of department policy, including bringing disrepute to the agency and falsification of arrest reports. He tried to appeal through the union, but even they wouldn't touch the case. The evidence was too clear, the victim too powerful. The Department of Justice's final report was a 200-page indictment of the city's policing culture. It resulted in a federal consent decree, a court-ordered mandate for reform. The decree required the department to implement 24/7 bodycam auditing by an independent board, the firing of the current police chief, mandatory Fourth Amendment training designed by federal agents, a complete overhaul of their suspicious person protocols, and an immediate end to quota-based stops. Then came the settlement. The city's insurance carrier, realizing they had zero chance of winning a jury trial with Marcus Sterling as the plaintiff, agreed to a massive payout. The final figure, $5.7 million. It was one of the largest settlements for a non-physical injury arrest in the state's history. In a move that stunned the city, Marcus Sterling didn't keep a dime of the money for himself. After legal fees, he donated the remaining millions to create the Justice in Policing Foundation, which provides free legal resources for victims of police misconduct who don't have the status or the badge he had. At the press conference, Sterling stood at a podium, looking as calm as he did in that parking lot. "Bistim, I didn't win because the system works. I won because I knew the system's weaknesses and I had the credentials to make them listen. This settlement isn't a victory. It's a down payment on a debt the city owes to everyone Miller stopped who didn't have a federal badge in their pocket." Sergeant Miller never worked in law enforcement again. He was added to the Brady list of dishonest officers, making him untestable as a witness and effectively unhireable. Marcus Sterling returned to the DEA, but he didn't go back to the same job. He was promoted to a national oversight position, where he now helps draft the very federal policies used to investigate departments, just like the one that tried to arrest him. This story matters because it forces us to look at a hard truth about accountability. Marcus Sterling had every advantage a person could have in that parking lot. He had the training, he had the legal knowledge, he had the incredible composure, and most importantly, he had a federal badge that high-ranking officials couldn't ignore. And still, despite all of that, a sergeant felt comfortable enough to ignore his rights and put him in handcuffs. Imagine those without those advantages. Imagine the person who doesn't know Terry V., Ohio by heart. Imagine the person who can't afford a high-powered civil rights attorney or doesn't have the Department of Justice on speed dial. This case resulted in a $5.7 million settlement and systemic reform only because the victim was unarrestable. This outcome is the exception, not the rule. Real accountability shouldn't require a federal badge. It should be the standard for every citizen, regardless of their profession. The fact that it took someone of Sterling's stature to bring this department to its knees shows just how much work is left to be done. Justice was served in this specific instance, but it served as a stark reminder of how many other Marcus Sterlings are currently sitting in jail cells because no one believed their side of the story. What was your biggest takeaway from this story? Do you think 5.7 million was enough, or should it have been more? I want to hear your thoughts, so let's get a discussion going in the comments. If you found this breakdown insightful, please share this video with someone who needs to see it. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the cases that the system tries to hide. We have some even more shocking body cam footage coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and stay vigilant. See you in the next one.